Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. I would like to acknowledge that we are within the territory of the Sechelt First Nation, and here we are at the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting. If I can call us to order, can I see a motion to adopt the agenda? Director Pratt, Director Seegers, are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, can we have a vote on the agenda? All in favor? Thank you. All opposed? And so our first item is a presentation from the General Manager of Infrastructure Services.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed. My name is Remco Rosenboom, and I'm the Manager of General Infrastructure Services. And I also would like to point out that Tracy Olsen will be the Secretary doing minutes for these committees. So, okay, I do have a presentation, so I think it's helpful for some of the directors to go to the side. I only prepared a short presentation with a couple of slides, so it won't take a lot of time. Given the subject of the report today, I prepared a presentation on our wastewater treatment facilities. And so the management of the wastewater treatment facilities is one of the three services we are obligated to provide under the Local Government Act. In the past, there has been all kinds of processes to onboard these facilities as a regional district for us to assume those responsibilities. But the current process is that a community group or developer, they initiate and take care of the entire construction of a facility. We establish a servicing bylaw which allows us to set user fees and parcel taxes to recover the cost for providing the service. After the commissioning of a facility, we assume the full responsibility for its operations, its maintenance, and any future upgrades to facilities. These are the locations of the 18 facilities we have. As you can see, they spread all the way from Langdale area through Sunnyside in the Granthams area, along the coast. There's quite some in the Pender area, South Pender as well as North Pender, and one at the very top of Jervis Inlet, Malibu. So in total we have 18 facilities, and the primary reason for a facility to be located on these locations is that there is a community or a developer who prefers to have a community sewer system over that each lot has its own private septic system, and in some locations there is no possibility to have an individual septic system because they are built on more rocky grounds. So in that case there is also not a septic system possible. So each system consists of a collection system, a treatment plant, and a discharge system. The collection system, some of them are gravity fed and other are pressurized, and it's all based on if the actual parcels served by the system is at a higher or lower elevation than the treatment facility itself. The treatment facilities itself are mostly in ground. You can see two pictures here from, let me see, the last one is Merrill Crescent in Pender, and the other was Lee Bay. So there are two in-ground systems, but the nature of what is in the ground differs really from site to site and is really based on when the facility was built, as well as the number of parcels hooked up to those systems. Every system, of course, has a discharge system, a system to discharge effluent, and it can be in the form of a drain field, just like a regular septic field, or in several of our plants there is an ocean outfall, as in those locations drain field is not possible because of the rocky soil conditions. So this is a summary of the 18 facilities we have, which electro area they're in, when they are constructed, when the SRD assumed full responsibility, and the number of parcels it serves. There are quite a number of facilities within electro area A, and the oldest ones are constructed in the 70s, and the most recent one is actually the Square Bay water treatment facility. There's a part of the infrastructure which was built in the 70s, and there is currently the final touches are done on the rebuild of the treatment facility itself. And the number of parcels served by each facility ranges from 6 for Greece Road to 180, which is Lee Bay. And I have to mention that 2 youth camps, the Malibu Youth Camp and the YMCA, they are also quite substantial in size, especially the Malibu one. In terms of regulatory authorities involved, it really depends on the size of the system. If the regulatory authority is Vancouver Coastal Health, VCH, or Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategies. The smaller systems, relatively small, are managed, regulated under the Public Health Act and administered by VCH, and the bigger systems are all administered under the Environmental Management Act and administered by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategies. For those facilities with an ocean outfall, DFO also, Department of Fisheries, Oceans Canada also has certain requirements. And the pictures here, the bottom one is Sunnyside, which is a small, very small one. It only serves 11 residents parcels, and you can see that in terms of the location, it's even close to a playground. And the top one is Secret Cove, and that is close to the ocean, and that is one of the facilities with an ocean outfall. So what are the ongoing responsibilities for the SCRD with respect to these facilities? It's the primary, one of the major ones is that we have to meet all regulatory requirements in terms of the quality of the effluent, monitoring on the effluent quality, and monthly and semi-annual reporting on those effluent data. There is, we of course, as also have a responsibility in terms of the management of the asset itself. So that's not only the treatment facility, but also the collection system and the discharge system, and that requires inspections and repairs of those systems, and the replacement of components at the end of the lifespan. When we, due to the fact that we have service bylaws established for these services, we are able to set parcel tax and user fees to recover the cost. And this is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
So, do we have any questions? Director Seegers?
Thank you. You indicated that wastewater systems are typically installed instead of septic if there's no possibility to have a septic in that location. Is it also used by developers to be able to put more density into an area that they wouldn't typically do because they'd have to have enough space for septic? Is that one way that they get more density?
Staff?
I would not be surprised if developers choose a communal system for that reason, yes.
Director Ties?
Yeah, my question was, in the report it said that it needed, that the MOE found that the Wood Creek Park one didn't have the appropriate levels. So why did it, so I assume that the MOE is the one that's doing the monitoring of it, and so we don't do any monitoring of our own? That's my question. And I guess I'll start with that one. Thanks.
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've made a note of answering that question when we discussed the report.
Right. Perhaps we should have a motion to receive the report, and then we can. All right. One more, Director Seegers.
Thank you. What happens, you said up there that we have to maintain them. What happens at the end of a lifespan? Does the group that has the service agreement around that then have to pay for a new service or new machine or whatever, new equipment for the site? And if so, who then installs it? And if we have to install it, do they also pay for our staff to do it, or do we take that offline and have somebody else come and do that?
To staff, please.
Thank you. It's when we assume the full responsibility for a treatment facility, we're also responsible for the entire replacement of a facility at the end of its lifespan.
Follow up?
Follow up.
I understand there's a service, like each of them has their own function set up so that the residents who actually are covered by that facility have to cover the costs of that. So if it's end of lifespan, do we then do a special levy or something in order to make sure that that's covered?
To staff, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So how the wastewater treatment facilities are covered are through multiple forms from a legislative perspective. We do have 3 of those facilities, which it does highlight in the report when we'll get to that. But we have 3 that are under agreement, so that would be YMCA, Malibu, and Pender. And the other have services established. Now, various forms. We have individual services for some of them. So Square Bay has just recently been extracted from the main, one of the main wastewater bylaws that we have. That was the original bylaw, and our corporate officer can always highlight the legislative framework for that. So the ones, when we take over the wastewater treatment facilities from the developer and we establish those functions, we do have the responsibility, as Jim Rosenboom had indicated, to service, so do all the operational requirements. We also have to make sure that if a treatment facility has to be refurbished or has to be replaced and or decommissioned potentially, haven't been faced with that one, we would have to then address the financial means to do those types of things. So one of the things we will be doing as this subject matter evolves, we'll be bringing more information related to the financial components and the issues that we have to address going forward with the financial sustainability of the various wastewater treatment facilities.
Yes, so Director Beamish.
Yeah, just a question. Where does the sludge from these facilities go?
To staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. We bring our sludge to the District of Seychelles owned a facility at Dusty Road, after which it's transported to the Water Resource Center for final treatment. Thank you.
Director Beamish.
Does that include for the remote ones too, like Malibu, or they bring that on?
I'm sure for all, and I'm not sure for Malibu. I have to find the information there.
Okay. Anyone else? Director Tees?
Thank you, Chair McMahon. I just, I guess it'll probably be answered when we go more into the details of financials, but yeah, I'm also interested in what resources among the SCRD are shared, like what staff is shared and all those costs, and what costs are shared between all the different sites, and then which costs are actually site-specific, and how are they passed on. So that's kind of what I was interested in. Thank you.
To staff?
Thanks, you Chair, for the question. We'll address this question as well when we talk about the report. Thank you.
And I just had one. Generally speaking, from the report, I take it that the fees that have been charged to the users have been covering operational costs, but there hasn't been money put aside for like capital replacement fund.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. We'll answer that question as well when we discuss the report.
Okay. Right. Sorry, Director
Follow up
Seegers.
on that question. Could we have generally yes or no?
To staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it is very complex because there is several systems. There's 15 systems, and there are varying answers for each and every one of them. So for us to provide a yes or no answer, it would be dependent on which facility you were speaking of. So if you asked us about Square Bay, I think Square Bay is in a good financial position. We received a grant to fully recommission that, but we do need to review the further rates going forward. So that would be part of that one. If you chose to pick on Secret Cove and or Jolly Roger, I would have a different answer for you. So it really depends on what facility you're speaking of, and that's what's so complex about these systems. From the operational standpoint, again, we have a lot of issues related to the operations. So again, that's where some of the report speaks to, some of the regulatory requirements that we have to operate these facilities. So perhaps, Chair, if we could suggest, we could move on to the report. If there's no further questions from the presentation perspective, we can maybe answer some of the questions at that time.
Thank you. Director Julius, did you want to ask a question? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I was just wondering about if any of these plants face the drought during that time of the year. And the second question, do we have any more planned these small water plants within the next 5 years?
Oh, sorry. To staff.
Thank you, Chair. These facilities, because they are wastewater treatment facilities, they were not impacted in any way by any of the drought conditions. They were fine. In terms of new facilities that might come, where we could assume a responsibility for within the next 5 years, I'm not aware of them, other than the 3 that are listed as in progress.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps we can move on to the report. Right. So could I have a motion to accept the report on rural areas wastewater treatment review? Director Beamish and Director Pratt. All in favor? Thank you. Would staff like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides the initial finding of a review we did, staff did over the last several months of all wastewater facilities where the SCD has some kind of responsibility for. And it talks about the regulatory responsibilities and the responsibilities in terms of asset management. Thank you.
Okay. Now, do we have any questions on the report? Director Seegers?
Thank you. I think I sent a question to the staff about this. I know there are various levels that you can be certified at for wastewater treatment. And what you indicated in here is that we need to ensure that our staff have those levels. Are these all rated as levels 1 through 4? And do we know how many staff we have at each level to make sure that we deal with these? That's one question. And then the other is, do we also look only internally or do we look externally for provision of services when we're looking at costs?
Over to staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. All these facilities that are regulated by under the Environmental Management Act are classified as small wastewater facility or class 1, 2, 3, or 4 facilities. Highest facility we currently are responsible for are 2 class 2 facilities, and those are the refurbished Square Bay facility and the Malibu facility.
Thank you. Yes, and the second part of the question?
The second part of the question regarding the external resources, currently we only have these plants operated by our own resources.
Thank you. Director Beamish?
Yeah, just trying to educate myself here because I'm from the municipal world, so I don't understand the regional world yet. But so I'm understanding the local government requires the regional district to assume responsibility for these plants when they are made. But the regional district is not an approving officer, so they have no jurisdiction over the approval of a subdivision where these plants may be approved. Is that correct?
To staff, please.
So there's a lot of legislative things involved in establishing a service. But before we get to that point, the SCRD has a subdivision servicing bylaw, and developers have to meet the standards in that bylaw. In addition, there's a board policy that says that the regional district will take over these community sewage treatment plants when their capacity is at a certain level, which I'm sorry I can't quote at this time. But so for certain sizes of plants or above, the SCRD of the day, board of the day, set a policy that we would take over those services. It doesn't, there are still other legislative requirements we have to follow in terms of establishing a service or a function that you may have heard referred to in the past, but the decision to take over these plants is partly based on this board policy.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's not a legislative requirement, then it's policy that we take them over when they are designed to and built to the standard established by the subdivision servicing bylaw. Is that correct?
To staff?
There are also legislative regulations which specify that we need to take over some of these facilities given their magnitude. So it's a combination of board policy and legislative requirement.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have one. Are there any other facilities out there in orbit that we don't know about or that aren't on that list? To staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. No, there are no other facilities that I'm aware about in our area that we should take a responsibility. We could assume a responsibility for. I still have one outstanding question on the Wood Creek facility in terms of the monitoring. We, as under our permits for these facilities, we do our own monitoring, and we report back to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategies on the outcomes of the monitoring. And we have to follow specific standards on how to do the monitoring, and the analysis of the samples is done by a certified laboratory.
Thank you. Director Hilt?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, thanks for all the data on the report, and I'm looking at the page 1 in the chart, and it sort of looks like there's kind of, I'm kind of looking for a bit of history, like there's the stuff that happened in the 2000s, and then there was the 1980s, and 1985 was the 1995, oh, 99, yeah, 1995 was the last, so it seems like there was a gap. Like, was there a sort of a change that happened where we went from these smallage package plants to, and then there was a gap, and then there seems to be a bit of a resurgence going on?
To staff?
Thank you, Chair. I've noticed that as well, and I have not been able to identify yet why exactly some facilities were taken on at which point in time.
Thank you. And I have one, which is in very general terms. I mean, there's not a lot of moving parts in a sewage treatment plant, so I just, what is the lifespan of these things? 50 years, 80 years, 10 years, roughly? Staff, please.
It does depend on the complexity of the system, but in the range of about 50 years. So in the case of Square Bay, you can see that that was commissioned back in 1970, and we're just replacing it now. So that would be a good indicator of sort of the lifespan you can assume. But it also depends on the level of operational maintenance that has been put into the plant, because, of course, that will contribute to its lifespan, either more or less.
Yeah. Thank you. And, Director Ties.
Thanks, Chair McMahon. I just quickly noticed that in the Wood Creek Park, it was constructed in 1999, but the SCRD assumed responsibility for it 4 years before it was constructed. So I don't know if they switched the numbers by accident or...
Actually, I know the answer to that. I think the original one didn't work and they had to reinstall it, but I'll ask staff.
Thank you, Chair. It's indeed true that the original plant wasn't working as we hoped it would, and hence we had to completely rebuild the entire facility.
Thank you. Anyone else on sewage?
For some, one of the questions that came up is how come we haven't seen many more plants? But a lot of these projects here were started, say, in 1980 or 85 or whenever they were. But like Kern Road was started obviously in 82, 83, and that was that the plant was designed for the expansion, and they just have kept on expanding. The same as Lee Bay, Saginaw Ridge. So a lot of the plants were developed, and then the project has grown around them. So just my comments and what I see. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? CAO?
Thank you, Chair. So part of this is also that historically in the past, the regional district looked at the facilities more as in the service itself, and so this review process has allowed us to look at it in a more comprehensive way across the board at all of the facilities. And while it's an initial report and more work needs to be done, we really haven't looked at it at this in this lens. We've looked at it more isolated at facility to facility in terms of things. So it's the start of an initial conversation, really.
Thank you. Now, we have no action items coming out of this other than the receipt of the report. So is there any new business? I don't think so. So we are not exactly adjourning the meeting because we're going in camera. So what is the...
Yes, thank you, Chair. We just wanted to let you know, or let the committee know, what the next steps are. So as CAO and the GM have indicated, this is really for information to start a discussion about the topic of our wastewater facilities. So there will be some budget proposals coming forward during our pre-budget. There will be some further reports as it relates to the financial condition of the wastewater facilities in January, infrastructure, and some decisions for the board will be coming forward at that time.
Good. Thank you very much. Before we go in camera, are there any questions from the press or the floor? Press? Okay. What?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just a quick question. Regarding the effluent that would go out to the Dusty Road area for treatment, who has the contract? Or is that sludge being handled by our RDVF and staff?
To staff? Do you?
Thank you, Chair. We have several contractors who work with to take the sludge from the treatment facilities to the district Sheffield side. Thank you.
Thank you. To staff?
I don't have that information at hand, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Donna? Oh. Well, yes, you certainly can. Okay.
You will get an answer. Thank you.
Donna?
On the islands and stuff, is that under a different jurisdiction? I just wondered about places off, like Gambia or Keats or something like that.
To staff?
Thank you, Chair. On the island, all residents have individual treatment systems, septic fields most of the time. So there is no communal system on the islands which requires or which the SRD had taken over the responsibility for.
Right, and then taking over responsibility has to link it to that.
Anyone else? Oh, Sophie. To staff?
Thank you, Chair. We were already working on a comprehensive asset management plan for the wastewater facilities because we already identified that there might be a gap there in the wording letter, only highlighted the fact that it was indeed a good decision to start that work.
So I guess just one follow-up question is like, when did it become clear that there were potentially problems with wastewater?
Staff, please.
As the report note on page 3 under asset management planning, we received a grant, and scope of that grant was changed in early 2018 to allow us to work on these wastewater facilities.
So just so I understand, so that means that's when you started to look and after these things started to come up, that's when you
Staff? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Anyone else? Keith, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned the waste that goes up to Dusty Road, the solid waste, the gray water. Does the gray water as well get shipped to the treatment plant, or is it just the solid?
To staff, please.
It's really the sludge. The fluids, they are discharged through the drain fields or through the outfall. So it's really once or twice a year that we have to dump the remaining solids. And that's what we take out.
Yeah, I know that the reason why I asked the question is because they used to actually spray the gray water throughout the mine site. And I asked that question just curious if they're still doing that. They used to actually spray as much as like 500 truckloads of gray water throughout the mine site, and I was just wondering if that was still taking place.
Staff.
As far as we're aware, that's not the regional district who is undertaking that activity.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. We're going to, I'm going to do a motion to go in camera here. Motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91C and K of the Community Charter, labor relations or other employee relations, and negotiations and related discussion respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages and that, in the view of the Council, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. Councillor Tives. Councillor, yes. Councillor everybody. Thank you.